Hey YouTube, today I'm with a buddy of mine who's a musician, and he's having some issues with his Pod X3 Live footboard, and we actually found out what the issue was, and chances are if you have a Pod X3 Live then you're probably having some issues too. So since we figured out what the issue is, we're going to go through a teardown and show you how to fix it, and chances are you are probably having some similar issues.
So a lot of times what happens with these boards is that you can see some of these buttons work fine, but then like this one takes a few times to push usually, and this one really hardly ever works.
That one doesn't work at all.
Doesn't really if you really, and that's going to be a pain, especially if you're using it in a stage setting. So getting in here is actually a lot easier than you might think it is. This is a T15 bit, and you just got to take off these 5 screws on the front, and then on the back it's these bottom 5. You don't need to worry about the ones on the top here. These can stay in. So let's get to it. First thing,
take the power out.
Maybe. And then we go.
Alright, so we've taken out these bottom screws. Again, you don't have to take out the top ones, so those are out, but we're going to go ahead and take out the front ones now. Alright, so we've just taken out the front ones.
In addition to the 10, the 5 across here and the 5 across the back, there are also 2 Phillips head screws. One of them, that's my treble knob is broken. One of the screws is right here, and the other one is right in here. So just remove those 2, and then the back plate will be free.
Alright, so far we've done the front screws, the rear screws, and then those 2 back plate screws that were here and here.
Once those are all out and removed, you should be able to kind of wiggle this back plastic. It can be kind of stubborn, but this whole thing should just lift right off. This right here is the board with the switches, and this one is as well. This is the one that's giving me problems. This is the bottom line of switches. What you want to do, if you look very carefully, is let me get a flat head. Right here on each, you can see around the solder points, there's little plastic grips, if you will. And all you have to do is very carefully just kind of pop them loose, and the board will come right up. Don't pull on it very hard. It doesn't take a lot of force. Just one by one, work your way down. And now the only thing connecting this to the board is this ribbon cable here. So if you flip this over, this is all the switches are. Just these little momentary buttons. And these are like, you can get a pack of 4 of these for like $3 or $4 at a hardware store.
Probably cheaper if you order them online.
That's right. So, okay, now that we're this far, you can start to narrow down what the actual problems are with the board. I know, because I've done this before, that the switches in my board are actually faulty. A lot of times, what some people have happen, or if you look very closely, you get some needle nose pliers, and if you look inside the switch, all this button is just a little black thing. Let me pull one of those out of here. Just this little black thing. And a lot of times what happens is this piece of plastic will break and not push down the button fully. So if that's your problem, we know where we are. And by the way, when you take this out, be very careful, because there is a spring in here as well. If I can grab that, just this little spring. And it fits just right on there like that. So make sure that you remove all of them. All you have to do is just lift it right out of there. Just lift it right out. Make sure you don't lose either piece, the spring or the pin. And just set them aside somewhere where you're not going to lose them.
Alright, so we went ahead and going to power it back on, and we just have it propped up on a little box so that way we can demonstrate.
This is just going to test each button to make sure the buttons actually, make sure that if you're propping it up on something like this, make sure you're not touching the circuitry underneath. So go ahead and power it on. You'll see the LEDs will light up. It's on D right now, and we know from earlier that the A button right here works usually, and C does as well. Now when I go to push B, as you can see, it doesn't work. C is still lit over here. So we know that this switch is actually the problem, and D is kind of stubborn as well.
And again, so just to reiterate, we've got the front and the rear, the back plate screws, and then the 6 of the buttons. So to test out that is actually not the full board, but it is in fact a single switch that's just gone bad, what we did is we have an extra one, and we can actually place this on the back side and touch the solder points, and then to make the connection and click the button, and we can see that the button will work perfectly.
Just sit it right on top of the solder pins.
It might take a few tries because it's kind of small.
It's real finicky. And once it's sitting on there, just push the button. Come on now. Right there, and push. It worked instantly.
And instantly turned the light on.
Yep.
So we can do it again.
Yeah, let me push this one. So there's D lit up right now. And when I put this back on the faulty B button on the solder pins, push it, and it works totally fine.
So we know now that it's this switch, in fact, which is an extremely cheap piece, especially to get this 200 plus piece of equipment working. So now all we have to do is unsolder the switch, the bad one, and resolder on the new one, and we should have a beautifully working board again.
And when you go to solder, this ribbon pin right here, it's fits sideways. You might have some hot glue on here that you can just break off with pliers or what have you. This will just pull just like that, straight out towards the front of the board. And that will completely disconnect this board from the rest.
So once you've got those switches replaced, resoldered on, we're just going to go ahead and briefly show the reassembly process.
The first thing you want to do, make sure you have this ribbon connected, make sure your power is off. And now to put the spring pins back in, it might be easier to do them individually. Let me get tweezers. That'd be easier than the pliers. All you have to do is take the spring, fit it. See this got a central little pocket right there. Just place the spring in there, standing on its end, and then sink the black pin right on top of it. It doesn't snap in or anything, it's just gravity holding it, and that just sits. Go ahead and do that with all 6.
Once the springs and the buttons are back in place, we'll go ahead and flip the board over and snap it back in.
All you have to do is very lightly line up these 3 clips with the holes, and just very lightly snap it. Hardly any pressure at all. Just fits right over it. Just like that. Fit right over it. And wiggle it down. Push it in place. I put the Phillips screws back in first. And then likewise with the T15 screws.
So there you have it. It's the Pod X3 Live teardown and fix. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Leave them down in the comments. I read all the comments. And if you like these videos, subscribe and let me know how it goes. Thanks.